Hello, this is Chris Jansen. Welcome to the End Evil podcast. Hello, hello. This is Chris Jansen. Welcome to the End Evil podcast. The End Evil podcast is dedicated to truth, freedom, and natural law. I got inspired by the book, The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. And that book is a great, I think, primer towards understanding a dynamic I think that can make a huge difference in the world and to help people work towards freedom for all humanity. And it's something that we're really not fully experiencing right now from my point of view. And I think that's part of why our world is inundated with evil. And evil to me means the destruction of freedom. And I got that quote from the book, The End of All Evil. Today, I have with me a wonderful guest. I've been watching this gentleman's work. I met him through the work of Andrew Kaufman, who I've really look up to. And then I saw Billy has interviewed Andy on multiple occasions. And I started watching many of his other interviews. And he's a great entertainer, poet, comedian, and a deep thinker. And so thank you so much, Billy, for joining me today for this conversation. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your show. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. And you've been doing all these wonderful interviews. Your website is billywatson.tv, correct?
That's correct. As I mentioned to you before we started, I used to have a lot more stuff on there, but Vimeo removed my account, which essentially took 10,500 channels, videos I made off my website. So I had to start from scratch and I'm slowly building it all back up again. So that was rather frustrating.
Yeah, I'll say. It's like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Labyrinth. They send you back to the beginning of the maze, right?
Yeah.
Is that well, that was probably because you shared too many truthful things, I would imagine, that they censored you. Is that what happened there, you think?
Well, there's a lot of stuff on there that they could have picked, and there was three in particular that they picked. The last one was a song I'd made. I changed the words to Kenny Rogers, The Gambler, to make it called The Liars. You gotta know when they're lying, know when they're trying, know when their lips are moving, they are talking shite. So they didn't like that one. That was the one because they named the three of them. Then I tried to point out the fact that, the WHO are talking nonsense and where's their evidence, and I'll talk to you about it. But never heard any more back from them, just you're barred, go away. So there's actually a song that's on my website just now. It's called My Life Doesn't Matter. I changed the words to Bohemian Rhapsody to explain my frustration at that. So it goes into Vimeo, basically. If you're up for a laugh, it's got some sweary words. I showed that one to Andrew Kaufman. I didn't think he would enjoy it because it's quite hardcore, but he said it was funny.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. I'll find the link and share it with when I present this video with you. That's great. I love the creativity that you put into it, and I think that's one thing that's missing in a lot of the alternative, presentations and shows that people put out there because it gets a little dry. And it's difficult subject matter that many of us discuss. I'm kind of curious a little bit more about your history and I always talk about the word realization. It's a kind of a big deal to me because I realize that before we realize certain things, we don't know those things. And then when we have a realization, it's like, oh, I was wrong, or there was something I didn't know that I know now. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are going through that process right now. And so if we can kind of think back to when we had our realizations, that might help other people on their journey. So I'm curious if you can remember any little details of your realization journey and what kind of woke you up to problems of evil in the world.
Well, I think just growing up, I think people are kind of awake now. They've always probably been more the kind of black sheep or the ones and don't understand what's going on in the world as a child, and people seem very cruel you know and then they kind of go into themselves or they create the world for them to explore and find their happiness because the real world's quite tough. So I used to play football when I was younger, not think about things too much, and then started a job, and some guy introduced marijuana, so maybe just smoking that, and then got into the rave scene and then LSD, and then I tried to be a rock star. So around about that time, that experience was like, I started going drinking. I realized all these guys in the pubs know a lot more about life, and I can't talk about it because at school I got through the exams, but I wasn't believing in their history and studying it all. So then I got a thirst for, just as the internet came out and I was working night shift, for reading things like Nostradamus and stuff like that, and just general history and improving myself. And then during the phase I was becoming a rock star, trying to do that, I was living a lifestyle quite well, but I didn't learn an instrument, so that was held me back. I basically met this girl who gave me a David Icke video called "Turning Off the Tide," and I was about 22 at the time. So I watched that video, then I watched the news, then I realised that the news has been lying to me all these years because they're not talking about things like the Bilderberg Group or the Council on Foreign Relations, or how money's coming from nothing, basically. So not long after, about 2 weeks after that, David Icke was in Edinburgh, so I went with that girl and her sister to see his gig, and there was only like 5 people in the audience. We actually interviewed him. I mentioned that to him in his one man and his dog tour. It was quite a big posh room in Edinburgh, but lots of chairs, but 5 people. But basically, yeah, so then that got me going into the rabbit holes right from that age. And because David Icke mentioned Bill Hicks, so I switched from trying to be a rock star to trying to wake up people by doing comedy. But when I was doing rock star, I was writing lyrics, so I was doing spoken word nights and then comedy nights. Occasionally get the guitar out and make some funny songs like Mr. Politician. I changed from Mr. Tambourine Man. Yeah, because I didn't really see myself as a researcher or somebody to study these things, and and I like fun and having a laugh, and people take life too seriously. So I thought I could wake up people with art, and I still kind of maybe believed that the world is fair, and if you've got talent and stuff, things will work out. But life isn't really like that. There's cliques form, and there's people with agendas and all that, and all walks of life. And I've never been very good at playing the game. I've always kind of been the outsider, so I'm always here on the outside, even in the protest meetings and even in the wake so-called community. I'm an outsider because there's a lot of people believing in the shills and all that kind of stuff. So I just do what I can, and hopefully I've recently put a book out. I've got 4 more in the process. But as far as waking up goes, yeah, the David Icke video was a big one, and then it's just a case of all the rabbit holes lead to all different things, and you just keep going, so it's layers of the onion. I got to a point with comedy that I realised that I was ranting a lot of people, and what you fight you become, so I was turning into a fascist dictator myself. So I thought I'd better try and tell some funny stories in that. And I also realised I realised there was a lot more to know. So I put that in the back burner a wee bit as far as comedy goes, and then researched a lot. I moved to Turkey for 12 years, never had the full-time job. So many hours spent listening to many podcasts and whatever. So there's a lot of shit in my head, but I don't know if I've got an overall kind of way of seeing the world. I just think there's possibilities, because I realise how little we do actually know. Once you really, like Socrates and that says, a wise man knows how little he knows, and the more you know, the more you realise how little you know. But people who think they know everything are usually very ignorant and then going to take their jab, etc. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, when someone acts like they know everything, they're the one you have to kind of be suspicious of, right? I mean, when I think I really respect humility so much in people, and when I meet people in person and they're able to show a little humility and laugh at themselves somewhat, that goes a long way towards building respect from my point of view. And the fact that you have that point of view, like, we have to learn to laugh at this stuff because it's really overwhelming. For folks, I can remember when I first started really digging in, I got an iPad and I started like just asking all these questions, and I started really wondering about things. And it just, everything I went down, for me, it was September 11th, the 9/11 thing. And I just was so curious, like, why has no one really understood that was some kind of conspiracy? It was so obvious to me from the beginning. And so that led me down of, what they call the rabbit hole. But it sounds like you were kind of like so many other people I meet in the freedom activists and speakers and truth speakers, that always kind of people that are willing to ask questions and never stop. and are curious. And like, I'm like you, I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm not like the best researcher out there, but you kind of aggregate these things and put them all together, and you start to stand back and look at the puzzle, and you're like, as much as I don't like this picture, this is the picture I'm seeing, and it's not good. And so for me, it kind of came to this word of evil. And I know that word affects people in different ways. So I'm kind of curious to see how the word evil hits you, and what does it mean to you when I use that word, and see where that goes in our conversation. What does the word evil mean to you, and how does that strike you?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of truth in words, and evil is lived backwards. So I don't think that's a coincidence. Basically, evil's like, to me, is the creator. If you look, or the God or the spirit, divine spirit within you. I think Bob Dylan, who I went to see recently, has got that song. You got to serve somebody, the Lord or the devil. The Lord could mean the devil, whatever. If you're talking about good or evil, it's like you can follow the good and do the right thing to do, but and it might not be what your ego wants you to do, because that's evil. If you do things for your own benefit, many people, everyone's kind of, to me, satanic. It's like their ego mind is in control of them. They're not actually in control of themselves. It's like the program's in control. To me, that's almost evil, because they're not in touch with their divine spark. They're not in touch with love and joy, and they don't know who they are. Basically, they're not spending any time working on themselves, so they're just a result of the system. And the system is built, it seems like, default by, well, the people that run it seem to be evil, in the heart, in the real sense, in the more extreme sense of the word, But that's filtering down all their practices and what they do, and the messages they put in the media, and the way they've got people on TikTok thinking, and there's apps now for Tinder. If you're in the same room, you can meet and just go and have sex, and there's no sacred ideas, there's no morality. So there's evil everywhere. I see many people, just not being a good person, to me is evil. It's, we can all have a great place here, but maybe it's just all a mixed match of different levels of consciousness, and we're all here to learn off each other. And can we judge each other? I'm sure I've done things other people could consider evil in some way, or not in tune with myself. So I've made many mistakes, and I think I don't know, this place here seems, the physical realm. I've talked to many different people over the years. There's one guy called Dr. Scott McQuaid, who his kind of philosophy through studying the Bible and taking it back to the Sumerian texts was like the physical world is like we've been merged almost with a reptilian seed or a demonic seed, and that's what humanity is. And when he believes when Nibiru comes back, we're going to split, and those that are living a good life will go back to the Father, and the rest will remain in hell. It's almost like these myths that come to us. It's like, are we getting a choice when we die? Do we understand? If we understood where we are, do we like it? Do we enjoy it? Can this place be made beautiful, or do we want to just get away from here? Is this a place to learn? Is it a school, or is it some kind of trap? Is it a hologram? Is it computer generated? What is it? Or what is it? God? Is it? We get told we live in a ball that's spinning through the universe. Nobody actually feels us moving at all. So there's many things to question. That's why I just think getting back to simplicity and people actually talking to each other and demonstrating that we can't survive alone, and we're all using, Satan's money, this false money. Food grows on trees, for free, but yet we're paying in supermarkets to get it. We're all part of this beast system, and that layer of the law and the beast system is almost like on top of, it's like fiction world is on top of real life. So you can't just talk to somebody and like, I recently went through an experience where I lost my job through COVID, and I tried to be reasonable with the CEO and say, look, this happened, let's sort it out. But you have to go through the legal process, and all the games come into play, and it's just a big game. Seems to be all set up by these black magic wizards who understand humanity, understand consciousness, and are keeping the rest of us in the dark. And the more they can keep us on a base level, and not using our higher mind, the easier we are to control. So again, it's for doing the work and overcoming evil and making different choices. It's to better yourself. And the more you work on yourself and better yourself and help others, the more people do that, then evil will have a lesser part to play in the world. People will be more genuine. But all the programming that's everywhere, all the outside information coming in, is to take people away from just sitting with themselves and listening to their own guidance, Things are from within. But people don't get that, so they get the program and everything that's put into their consciousness. So I hope that answered your question, probably not, but
you did, absolutely. And I really like I felt that inspiration. I've told people about this. Sometimes I get this little like thing that runs up my spine and like tingles in my head. And when you said, the divine spark, it's like that's the way I've been using that term recently, because like the word God, for instance, so often people think of that word and they think of what they were told through religion. I grew up in Christianity, and I don't like the way that so often religions want to personify God. And it, to me, makes a lot more sense to describe it as a divine all, or the, like you said, the divine spark. And when people are able to recognize that this reality has some pretty inherent reality to it, like you're born in this skin and you have this mind and we can make these choices, right? Like we can get sucked into doing things that are totally self-serving, like you're saying, that can then become like evil actions, right? Because we're not recognizing that we're connected to everything around us. And that is actually why I use the symbol of the tree of life, because I'm trying to explain and encourage people to recognize this reality that we are all connected to each other and the things we do matter. And just like a room can be cleaned up, we can clean up this evil situation. And like you're saying, that's really about each of us doing our own work. And we have that ability, that natural tendency to be able to kind of figure out, oh, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't feel good when I hit that person. Now I feel shitty about myself, and that can be blocked off, and people can be put in situations where they don't do that correctly. But we also can work towards doing the right thing, like you're saying, raising our vibrations and working on ourselves. But it can be, honestly, I think when people come to realize the extent of how bad things are, like you're saying, it almost feels like a prison planet situation. We look back at these stories all the way to Sumerians. We see this slavery happening again and again, the slavery of humankind, this churning mill of the treatment of other people, human trafficking, what happens to children, terrible, terrible things. And we realize these things, it can be kind of hopeless. And so I was hoping you could speak a little bit about like that process. It sounds like you've really made an effort to bring in the comedy, to bring in the poetry, to bring in the creative spirit, and not dwell on just the bad, evil things, but find a way to find the spark of hope and joy and help other people do that too. So, any hints or how you go about that, or how people avoid falling into hopelessness, realizing the extent of this problem? I'd like to hear your advice and thoughts on that.
yeah, well, falling into hopelessness, it feels like, everything in the world's just, you've got Klaus Schwab and the gang wrote just the saying we're dictators, this is where we're going. And it's like, oh, fuck, here we go. And there's a few groups saying, stop, stop. But, is there enough? We're all still sitting online and not really, living in the real world. So the internet, World Wide Web, although it's great, we can have these communications and we can discuss things with each other all around, the world. It's real life is where it's happening, and these guys are making the plans in the real life. So what are we doing? If we actually started taking action in the real world, hopelessness would fade because we're actually involved in action. If the hopelessness is coming because we're all still sitting in our rooms, and like I'm trying to do stuff online to get myself out there, but really I want to get my guitar or whatever and go tour around. But we've got this thing for money. We'll have to like pay the bills and go in the rat race and do things we don't want to do just to survive. So it's like we're all caught in this trap that we've got to go to these jobs, 9 to 5, come home tired, watch the football, drink a beer, do that at the weekend, go and get really drunk to forget about it, start again. So many people living a life not even existing, And yeah, so the ones that are awake, realizing, oh my God, look at everyone around me, this is impossible. That's where the hopelessness comes in. But if we do start to think about things like when the so-called lockdown happened, the toilet paper vanished. We need to be self-sufficient more, and that includes, first of all, our food supply, and the quality of our food needs to be good. And if we all started, helping each other, like one communities, like one person could grow potatoes and the next one tomatoes, and then we could all start in a simple way, just swapping food with each other and goods and services, to step away from the system. Because to me, that's a big problem, because we're all engaged in using their banknotes. We're all engaged with the legal name. We're all engaged. We pick up the bits of paper. We go to the vote booths to vote for them. So yeah, that's basically, it's taking action. And even if I'm still sitting here, the reason there's so much videos I make or interviews I do is because I think, well, I'm sitting here, but I'll do something and I'll try and help somebody, and eventually maybe I'll be self-sustainable, and people will value my work and I'll get rewarded. So I'm like being my own creator in this world, and I'm self-sufficient, rather than going to these jobs where you have to do things you hate just for money, even if you're not doing something you love, but it's your own talents, and you've worked to gain those skills and knowledge. I think it's a far better way to earn money or to contribute than just turning up for a task or something. So yeah, people again have to think about their own capabilities, and they get brainwashed into thinking they're not very talented or they could never do that. But then maybe in a certain situation, they'll start to do things that we never have done before. And next thing you know, it's maybe a skill of really good at. So people don't explore the different options because they don't see any options. But I think everyone has a kind of purpose, and it's asking themselves those questions and what can they do. And then when you get a purpose and a direction, it gives you hope, and then you move towards that with a goal and a plan, even if it's a bit like wide to start with, and you can kind of narrow it in, and then you move somewhere in life and you grow and you change. It's the people that just do the same job all the time, and 40 years later they meet you and say, "Oh, you've changed a lot." And we say, "Well, why haven't you?" We're not here to stay the same. We're here to grow and change and be the best versions of ourselves. And this whole culture of just getting drunk and getting wasted and everything, and it's not very conducive to being happy. And people have lost their inner joy. There's not much joy going around. People need substances or need to get fucked up or have an extreme sport or something to get some kind of life. But actually, we can bring joy with each other just by maybe doing some kind of community dancing and things like that. Life can be a lot simpler, but we complicate everything. And now there's lots of immigrants coming in all these countries, so that's lots of culture clashes, and it's people not talking to each other. We're the victims of agendas, but yet we don't really, we fight the police or the army are against us, and it's like we're fighting ourselves, but really the perpetrators of all this are behind the shadows. And we need to take back our power, basically. That's the main thing, taking back your own power and realising every day's a choice. What can you do? Do you have to go to the job? Because I've been in some really bad situations and somehow you get through, and realise it takes the fear away, because fear's a big controller as well. Switching off the TV. If you're in hopelessness, get the TV off and go for a walk in nature is step number one, I would say.
Huge. I love nature. I actually call it the living Bible. To me, it's like, from the time I spent in religion and then in churches and stuff, when I go out to nature, I'm like, this is where the messages are. From my point of view, I get the most divine, sort of inspiration and realizations often in nature, walking through the trees or, spending those times. And I think, you touched on a couple things that I think are huge. The words we use are important, how we talk to ourselves. And then like what you're describing is when you start to speak out, like doing these videos, for instance, I've had this experience. It's like, I like the allegory of an arrow. When you're moving like an arrow, you're not focused on the problem. You're focused on where you're going. And that ties into our purpose and this understanding that there is a divine, amazing ability, like truth about this reality, that we have a purpose that we can discover. And when you start tapping into that, it really changes the point of view, no matter how dire things are around us. If I feel like I'm working on something that's making things better, or I'm part of the solution, that really changes my outlook too. And that allows me to be a more, like you're saying, a person in the world that can have community and connections and get along with people, even if we disagree. But we're constantly bombarded by dialectics. That's what I was talking about a good friend last night. Just there's so many these people you're talking about, these occult um, magicians or occultists at the top of the pyramid of evil in this world, are just, they've been pumping these things out for, seems like, generations. Just all kinds of things for us to disagree and argue about, and to keep us at odds with one another. I can remember myself, like you said, with the fear. I had one particular construction job during the COVID thing where they all of a sudden were trying to force me to wear a mask on the job site. And I was fighting back and saying, I don't have to. And I remember one day just getting so furious that I threw my construction helmet down the hallway and, just kind of yelled at the top of my lungs. And I was so frustrated, but I was scared too, like I didn't want to lose my job. And I was in this position where, I needed the money, but on the other hand, I wasn't willing to sacrifice what I knew was right. Like no one could tell me what to do. And this just isn't right. So it's like, we're always faced with these difficult choices, and we have to battle our way through. And that's part of the learning journey of finding our purpose and feeling what's right. And I'm like, I think that's a good encouragement to get people to make that change.
One of the things I thought about another point that's a turning point is, again, when I was with my friends hanging out and started work. One of them picked up a guitar and he wrote some songs. It's like, let's form a band and be a rock star. And it's just like this idea dawned on me. It's like, hold on a minute. It's like, well, we can do things, because up until that point, I'm just living, And it's like, hold on, like I can actually do something, because I was quite a good footballer. I played for a young team, but I never actually thought about being a professional, even though I was playing for like the best team in Scotland and stuff. But when he said that, so I tried to be a rock star with him. We kind of fell out, and then I was like, well, what am I going to do? I had these idea dreams and something, getting out of my work and doing something. Am I just going to stop, or am I going to pick up myself and keep going? So I just decided to keep going. I've been banging away at it myself ever since. But again, what else are you going to do? I enjoy it. Keeps life interesting, and yeah, it feels though you're doing something, because we all have to face ourselves when we meet our maker. So at least I can say, well, I might not have succeeded in the outside big bad world, who knows, but I gave it my best shot, or I tried to do something and leave some kind of legacy. People don't even think about legacy so much. You've been here for a life. What did you do? What did you leave behind you? Who were you? Are you just a ghost? What have you got to offer? We're not here just to be silent and keep our mouths shut and follow the leader and stuff like that. But a lot of people will do that to the point where they'll inject themselves with something they don't even know what it is. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and if you look, I think back about the things I've studied, historical facts. Well, a lot of things in history, it's hard to tell for sure whether they're facts. We hear these stories, right? But many of these stories are about amazing people that did things that were exceptional, and many of these we can totally verify. Just look at the Olympics that have happened over and over. People keep breaking records and doing things that no one did before. Same with technology. People keep coming up with ideas that were never thought of before. There seems to be, in this realm of reality we're experiencing, a sort of unlimited possibility or opportunity. So with all this room to grow, why are we so inhibited? It kind of doesn't make sense. It's sort of a slap in the face of what's possible here and how beautiful and amazing things could be. And then we see the way things seem to be going, which is sort of a degradation of this amazing aspect of creation, that we can create things and we can do things. And we find ourselves, like you're saying, kind of going through this mill where we're arguing with each other and finding ourselves stuck in this grind. So, you described some real good things we can do to start changing, building local community, getting out in nature, um, engaging your creative energy, whether it's music or poetry. But like, I'm kind of curious, what would you think is like kind of like the most important thing to you? You know, like if you were, here's one way to look at it. If you got to go in a time machine to talk to your 18-year-old self, what do you think would be like one of the most important things you would want to communicate to your younger self or someone else? That's maybe a hard question to throw on you, but
Yeah, well, basically be wary of other people and their agendas. And I'm a, I don't know if I could say being used, but people take advantage of a better nature. You know, I'm quite naive and trusting, and time again, I've done things for other people or sacrificed myself and my own desires or wishes to make other people happy. And that can be good to a certain extent. But ultimately, I think, you know, you really have to be protective of your own goals and desires and make sure you meet your own, you know, dreams or whatever you want to do to make yourself happy. And then you'll be in a better position to be happy around other people, you know. When you start sacrificing yourself to make others happy, then you become miserable. And it's just a spiral. Then you start, you know, going downwards until, because many times I've given up various things like doing the comedy or whatever and try to be normal and straight, and I can't do it, you know, and it comes back to me, or, you know, so the sooner you can realize that you're maybe different or you've got something you want to do, kind of acknowledge it and protect it and work on it. And if somebody comes in to try and steal your energy away and not be supportive of you and kind of critical, even backhandedly, you know, and just be careful of other people's energy and be protective, because, you know, unfortunately, the world, people aren't what you. If you're a good person, you think other people are like that, but most people, by their actions, you know, always let you down. I've found over the years, many times, you join a group and it always kind of goes tits up, but maybe that's just human nature. Things change, but yeah, it'd be good to find. Like, if I've always said, you know, all these people that are waking up and stuff. It'd be good if we went to an island somewhere and just had our community. You know, like we had a day I hosted recently, all these bands playing cool music, all the audience was awake, you know, and they were just talking around, mingling, and it was all cool, you know. But when you're outside, you're wary of people because of their ongoing generations passing on their ignorance to each other, you know. And the schools are not there to make well-rounded individuals; they're there to keep people stupid. So, I just that kind of thing. Be careful of other people's intentions and
you know, I really what we call sympathize with what you're discussing, because I've kind of been always that type of person where like I'm a people pleaser, I guess, to some extent a lot of my life. I like really always working to mediate situations or try to hope the best of somebody. You know, when I see a really bad driver, I usually say to myself, oh, first time driver. You know, I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And so many times in life, like you're saying, I've extended an olive branch of kindness to someone, and then, you know, you find out, wow, so many people are screwed up, you know. And it's true what you're saying. Part of this self-work is recognizing that, you know, it's like the occultist mystery school thing where you got the one pillar that is the the non-aggression principle, which is like don't harm, right? Don't harm. You don't want to be harmed, don't harm others. But the other pillar is the self-defense principle, and that is, you know, keep your boundaries, don't let people harm you in the first place, you know. And that is something I've really had to come around to realizing, and it's part of this same realization of just how evil the world is. I honestly, my personal reflection on human nature is not that we're inherently bad or inherently our nature is to do bad things, but we've been conditioned that way because of so many years of, like I'm saying, generational trauma, the slavery of human beings over time. It's like when if you take a good animals, like a good dog, most dogs are like the sweetest things, right? They'll do anything for you. But if you put them in a tight cage and you whip them and you don't feed them, yeah, they kind of turn out not so nice, you know. And I think that's what we got going on in the world. And so it's a hard realization for people to realize, because we have this inherent part of us that wants to be sweet and good and get along without harming. But then we have a world that is just actually, if you harm people and lie and cheat, you can actually do better and get more of these bills in your pocket that you can use to leverage and maneuver in the world. It's just totally backwards, right?
Yeah, I just went to see a band called Turin Breaks, and actually my YouTube channel posted their song "World Like That." I don't want to live in a world like that. Basically, everything's inside out, everything's upside down, and that seems to be what we're living in. Just everything ignorant, education's indoctrination, health is making people sick, profiting from their illness. Everything's just politics, democracy is a joke, and justice is a joke. It's just, yeah, what can we do? Try our best and soldier on. And unfortunately, there's not enough people, it seems like, with a real consciousness to actually talk about these things. I live in a small town. Me and my partner were literally the only people not wearing a mask for a year, It's insane.
Yeah, it really makes you realize. That's kind of, for me, it was a big wake up call. I thought the little town I lived in was a lot of awake, aware people. And then the coronavirus hit. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm surrounded by Nazis. I feel like everybody that I thought was okay is not. They would be like really happy to turn me in right now. It's just like, whoa, it was way worse than I thought. And I already knew there were big problems in the world. And I knew a lot of people's consciousness was not where it needs to be. But it was honestly shocking when the pandemic, scamdemic hit. And I was right away suspicious. And just like you, I remember watching Crow 777 actually is where I discovered David Parker and their book, What Really Makes You Ill. And I know that made an impression on you because I was watching your interview. And so like, were you already kind of questioning the virus theory, or was that when you started rethinking even health?
Well, I was aware that AIDS was a big scam and caused by AZT drug. I had a book
Right.
called Medical Mafia many years ago. I think David Icke recommended it. So I hadn't really figured out so much about catching a cold and stuff like that. I just thought, oh, they just misdiagnosed AIDS. When I never looked into it, I knew it was a scam, but I was highly suspicious, and especially anything that comes into the news the way it does. And you just knew the Wuhan story was a big one. They were playing a card there. And I was telling people in my work and that, it's 5G. I interviewed the guy called Mark Steele who talks a lot about that. I said, it's definitely no virus. So on the day we got sent home from work or whatever, I was like, it's a joke, it's definitely not that. And then the furlough started where nobody had to go to work for a couple of months. And about a week into that, I seen the Don and David interview with, what do you call him? Richie from Boston. And then I got a hold of them quite quickly and interviewed them a couple of times, got their book. And then from then on, I was telling people it was so obvious once you get the facts. I was like, all right, that makes sense. All right, so there's no evidence for it. Okay, so, and the whole thing about the virology being fraudulent, it's not that hard to understand. So I was going around meetings holding the book up and all these protest meetings, and people are still babbling nonsense and shoving me to the side. And it made me wonder who's organising these things and do they really care about the truth? And because even to this day, it still gets on my nerves. They're all these anti-vaxxers and all these movies getting made died suddenly, and there was another couple recently. They all have the premise that the virus is still real and the pandemic still happened, but it's just the vaccines are dodgy, but all vaccines are poison. So there's always, and there's so many truthers out there that will play this narrative, and support people that are still not fully awake to the big lie. And to me, that's something that needs to be exposed fully, so everyone understands you can't catch germs from each other, because that's a major thing that they're going to use for their next level of control or pandemic, whatever they try and play. I'm not saying contagion itself is fully 100% not true, because there's maybe other ways, energetically and things like that, that you could have some kind of so-called contagion, like somebody sneezes and you sneeze. But as far as the virus particle, that's not happening. So it's something that should be common knowledge, and I've banged on about it long enough. I'm tired of doing it.
Yeah, it's frustrating because people are just so calcified and stuck on seeing things a certain way. And like you pointed out a couple minutes ago, there's so many aspects of our reality in these institutions. We got the medical institution, like you're just talking about now, pretty obvious big problems with the medical institution. We got the schooling institutions, pretty big problems there. Many of the religious institutions, and you can look back in history how they've, through tyranny, hurt people. And there's just like every single institution, the money, the universities that have been corrupted, or maybe from the beginning there's been some sort of hand guiding them in these evil directions. So like we said before, it's a little overwhelming. We both talked about how we start to change that dynamic in our own person. But do you see a bridge between where we're at and the world we'd like to live in? I try to imagine it. What part of my podcast is saying, giving some people hope. We can end evil. We can live in a better world. And I know you described a couple things, working together, farming, trading food. What are kind of like the number one biggest things that are important for people to do, to take away from our discussion? And, tomorrow, the next day, if we want to actually work towards this better world, what are the most important things that you would recommend people do?
Well, I've said it before, but I think the TV is very poisonous thing that controls people on a massive level. They've got no idea the level of subliminal program that's involved in every program, and just a whole way of conditioning their brain to see the world a certain way and stop them thinking for themselves. And then on top of that, you've got the water supply, where I believe a couple of years ago they started adding a specific chemical to another chemical to the water here, which made a lot of people get ill. And at distill water, again, Don Lester, David Parker, they told me about distilled water. I've been distilling water ever since, and it's unbelievably different how good it is compared to the tap water. So that's ways you can be getting poisoned. The foods that we're eating, all the stuff in these monster drinks and all the fake food out there that people are consuming, that's not doing us any good. Everything that you take into your consciousness affects it. So you should be more careful about the people who you hang out with, and the content you consume. And if possible, try to do things like self-hypnosis tapes to kind of rewire your brain to start perceiving and thinking differently. And also, I've done a bit of NLP and stuff, and even meditation can be good. But just to realize that you are not a slave to your mind. When you meditate, you can watch your thoughts. So you're not your thoughts. So these thoughts can come and go, and you don't need to act on everything. You don't need to be a slave to your emotions. You have to develop emotional intelligence so that, whatever happens, it's not, emotionally reacting and, fighting back. It's like, okay, that's happened. It's not the end of the world. How do we fix it? More logic and reason could be a good idea. But there certainly seems to be almost like a split happening, or it's more obvious the gap between those that are kind of wanting to be awake and on the journey there, and those that are firmly rooted. Whether it'll get to a point where there's like a 100th monkey syndrome, where enough people will be awake, the consciousness will bring these other people up. Or, I believe like there's resets every so often, and possibly that these controllers, they hide down the tunnels that they've all got built there and all supplied. And then there's going to be an earthquake, or every so often there's a tsunami, or some people again say Nibiru's coming back, or some kind of cataclysm, which sends things back to the kind of Stone Age a little bit, but they're all down the tunnels, and then they come up and then restart society again. In which case, it'd be a case of us. Like, I interviewed a guy called Stephen D. Kelly, who talks about the Getty Museum in America being the center point for getting down to the underground system. And he believes everybody should go and occupy the Getty, because if there is this huge underground system down there, what they're doing and what they're preparing for, and why they're keeping us away from it. The same as the Antarctic wall, or people say Antarctica, but why is there a no-fly zone? Why can't you take boats there? Are we trapped in this reality? Who's trapping us? I think there was a series called Westworld, which was quite good. It's like robots, and then gradually waking up, but they've got these controllers on the outside, maybe watching it. Who knows? It's like, there's all these different things you can imagine, but in reality, to keep things simple, it's just about looking after yourself better and, thinking about everything you put on your body. Even the deodorants have aluminium, the water has, you go to a shower, your skin's absorbent, put suntan cream on. We live in a very toxic world, and it's like a war on every level. And it's very hard to find true, genuine people. So I don't know, you want to leave them with hope. Watch my TV channel. I'm trying to build up a community there. Watch your stuff. Try make friends with people like minds. See if you can get together in your local community. I had a couple of nights ago. There's a lady doing a talk, and again, people met in the local community. And I'm going to go back and do a gig in the same bar. So in the real world, things can happen as well as online. But if you can take the online to the real world, and then get inspired by each other, and people doing things together is good. And we can't survive alone. And, unfortunately, we're all kind of conditioned this life to be in the TV, in the room, watching the TV alone. And that's that. Anyway.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I had a quick little thing there. But yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you. And that's kind of where I usually go with this podcast, is talking about what we can actually do. And in the end, that's a personal battle for each of us, that we have, like, all the pieces that we can actually control in this game are what we have access to. And I kind of like the looking at the Stoics from history, because they did a pretty good job of talking about that sphere of control. What can we actually do? And some of the things you're describing is we can take care of ourselves. We can nurture our own personal spirit. And if we're paying attention to the input that comes in, and like you said, the TV, the food, the water, if we're taking those things seriously and keeping our body, our vessel, our kingdom, that's where we're allowed to have authority to our own self in our own body, that I'm the author of my own story. What kind of story do I want to tell? Like you said before, legacy. What kind of realization only takes a moment, is one thing occurred to me many times. It seems so impossible that the whole world could wake up to these consciousness. But when you think about it, it really only takes a millisecond, a nanosecond, for people to realize something. And in theory, many, many, many people could realize something at the same time. And so the whole world could actually change very quickly, if, like you said, it starts to build up and it spreads like a wildfire. But the only way that's going to happen, if those of us that are already conscious and somewhat aware, enliven our own spirits and bring ourselves up and find that energy from within and deal with our health issues, and don't let crappy stuff. I would say, that I was watching, it's like 3 or 4 years ago, I was watching Game of Thrones. I hear a lot of people talking about Game of Thrones. And it always, remember, for me, there was a major realization one day when I was watching one of those shows. And like 2 days later, I'm at work doing carpentry work, just running some screws in or whatever. And my brain is replaying this violent scene where this one guy kills the other guy and blood splatters everywhere. And I started being conscious of this. And I'm like, why am I living through this trauma right now? It's only a few seconds, but it's affecting my day. Like, I'm not concentrating as good as I can because my brain's like reliving this terrible, traumatic scene. That, why is it even there? Do I even need that in my head? And I honestly don't watch those shows much ever since. Occasionally I will, but I'm careful. Like, I realize it does affect me. I'm like a sponge, even if I know what's going on.
Yeah, well, I lived in Turkey, and so I was not watching mainstream news. But one time, after a few years or whatever, I went to a more British holiday resort. So all the bars are just playing the BBC News, just whether you like it or not. And just the feeling it gave me after not being around it for a while, I was just like, oh, it's making me tense. Like, I'll get that off. It's horrible. People don't realize it.
Yeah, like if you step away from it for a while. I went in like a little donut shop one day, and they had the big giant TV, up in the corner of the room. And I'm watching what they're playing. It was like I think it was CNN or something, one of those news where they're constantly reporting news. And it was like the whole thing they were reporting was some argument between a politician and her family. Like, she got into a fist fight with their family or something. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, is that really even worth broadcasting at all. That's like something we would argue about in first grade, who got in a fight with who or something. And that's like prime time, some really important thing they're trying to share with everybody. It's like, look at the general consciousness of people, what they're getting sucked into. A part of it's just ignoring that crap. Don't let it in the first place, right?
Yeah, I was in the factory I used to work at. I had a TV show in the BBC News, and then beside it there was a poster saying, "Are you having problems with mental health?" It's like, yeah, caused by that thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, pay close attention to what you're putting in, and that will help what's going out. And I think, like you said, the things we're doing, these speaking engagements, these conversations with other conscious people, there's a networking aspect going on. It opens the doors for future people to come to realizations. Like you and I have looked at other people's, David Icke. For me, Mark Passio was a big person. Andrew Kaufman recently has been inspiring me. Tom Cowan, like these people we read about, David Parkey and Don Lester. I mean, they inspired us. Like when we write things down, when we take the energy and we put the ball on the playing field, we put our word out there into the universe. That opens the door for things to change. We have this amazing ability as divine creations to affect reality, and we can create things. And that's our connection. That's our conduit to the divine. And that's our opportunity to make this place better, and I appreciate what you're doing. And I'd like you to spend a couple more minutes talking about your plans going forward and your website and where people can check you out and all that kind of thing.
Okay, well, thanks again for having me. Yeah, I'm just basically trying to get all my website stuff back up online. It's a huge task. I think I'm going to need to pay somebody to do that because it's just too draining and boring, And I've got 4 books that I've almost finished editing, so I want to get them out and then start writing some more and going to perform more in the new year. Once I've got the website and books taken care of, I want to go out more and probably start writing some more songs and getting into music a bit more. I've kind of got the first for that recently because when I was finishing writing my last book, I changed the words to one song, as I mentioned, The Liars, and then I went on to do about 5 or 6 more. I was like, oh, this is really good. So then I finished the book, but I've still to go back and do that. But I'm doing a songwriting course just now, which is quite interesting. So I'm always trying different things,
Wonderful. I want to hear a little more about these books. I didn't get into that on your website. Is 4 books. Wow, that's fantastic.
I've got one out just now that's called Buckin, Cunny, Funt. Actually, somebody gave me a 5-star review for that on Amazon and said good things about it, but Amazon never published it because of their community standards. Basically, it's because in the book there's a poem in there called Follow the Science, which is all about, the virus thing. So they're literally censoring me on there as well. People can't give me a review because they don't want the topic getting out there. But that's funny poems and lyrics written in Scottish. If some people have read Trainspotting, it's quite similar. But the next 4 books is 2 poetry books and my life story and comedy scripts. So I want to get them out and then start writing some new comedy and getting out. I'm banned from comedy and the, Edinburgh Festival and stuff like that. So I'm going to have to do my own thing because they don't like the truth out there in the real world, So
that's just too funny. We can't be that funny.
Basically, it's what seems like quite a lot. But anyway,
I loved your that title. I did see the title of it's Bucking Funny. Say it again.
Buckin, Cunny, Funt.
Bucking, Cunny, Funt. Yeah, that's a Spoonerism. Have you ever heard of Spooner?
No.
There was I don't know, maybe it's folklore. He was a preacher apparently, and he would always do that by accident, switch the first 2 letters of words, and his name was Spooner, and so they started calling those Spoonerisms, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. I've always loved plays on words, and that's great. I love it.
Basically, I was going to call it Funny Cunt. There is a poem in the book called Funny Gunt about my attempts to stand-up comedy. But then I thought Amazon titles wouldn't like that too much. So then I thought Cunny Funt. But there was already another book called Cunny Funt. So it became Buckin, Cunny Funt.
Buckin, Cunny, Funt. I love it. Puns are my other thing. Sometimes people are like, groan, oh, another pun. Come on, dad jokes. But I think those are the little spices of life, and like playing with words and using words is it's a tool, and it's a fun tool. And so I recommend people to look into words, look into etymology of words, play with them, have fun with them. There's a lot of truth to be learned in words and looking at them. So
Yeah, totally.
so thanks for sharing all your words and your work. Billy Watson TV.tv,
Yep.
kind of like where it's all at, right? And then you got a YouTube channel, or
Yeah, again, I was putting stuff on there, but they started banning me as well. So it's kind of, some stuff on Odyssey, some on BitChute, some on YouTube, because I've do so many different things. It's hard to. I'm trying to get the website back up to speed and get everything all on there, and use these other channels for people to come back to my website. I've also got a community that people can sign up for free, and yeah, basically just like it's like more on Facebook. So I can post whatever I want in there as well, because Facebook don't like certain posts on that as well with the fact checkers. So yeah, I try to provide things for people. It would be ideal if I could get supported to do it more full time, but I realize things are tough for everyone, and people don't have spare money for their own shopping these days. It's pretty bad.
yeah,
But
I hear you.
again, we do what we can, and uh, have fun with it.
Right on. Thanks so much, Billy. Listeners, check out BillyWatson.tv. I looked him up on Odyssey and just typed in Billy Watson, and I found all kinds of great interviews there. So you can check out more of his work. Maybe you can find his donate page and throw him a couple bucks. That'd be huge. Join the community and go out there and like we said, be an arrow, find your purpose, spread your word, and help us in this process of making the world a better place. Thanks much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop